Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Hearthstone Championship Tour Europe Spring Preliminary. My name is TJ, and joining me on the desk for this next match is going to be Robert Wing and Raven. How you guys have been joining so far today? We've seen two play. Nice little stare down there with Raven.
We got a couple of birds on the desk.
Yeah,
Raven.
we do. We've seen two players now qualify and make it to that spring championship. How have you been joining so far, Rob?
I was really good. That last match, we were watching it, and then all of a sudden it was over.
Yeah. It escalated
ended.
very quickly. Very quickly.
A couple of Thorsons come on the board. Stuff happens.
Yeah, I'm still a little bit scared of the place that Loyan described to me in our interview. But next match, moving into it, it is going to be Devou taking on Thijs. Raven, this is a pretty nice match. Frank actually was the caster that predicted Thijs to move on to the championship. Do you think he's going to be able to do it with this lineup?
Yeah, I mean, however much I actually want everyone else to drop off the board like I have, I actually do like Thijs quite a lot, and he's a very, very competent player, probably one of the most consistent in the world so far. And I think his lineup's really interesting as well, and it's definitely going to be a mountain to climb for Devou here, because Thijs, like I said, is one of the best players, super consistent, and he's got this far already, and I have no doubt he can make it further.
And Rob, tell me a little bit about Devou. What is he's a little bit of an unknown player, especially compared to someone like Thijs, who's been around the competitive scene for a long time. Tell me what you know about Devou.
Right, so Diggin kind of started that Norwegian Hearthstone player revolution last season, and Devou is here to pick it right back up. He's actually on the same team, Gamers League. He's the team captain with Diggin and Bunny Hopper. And looking at the bracket as far as who he had to fight to get to this point, aren't too many names that really stick out. He did 3-0 Nixley in the upper bracket, though, to get to this point. And Nixley, as some might remember, is the guy who made the great faces from the Winter Championship season. So, he played very well, so kind of cool to see he had to go through somebody that we know to get to this point.
Yeah, and Diggin actually made it really far in the tournament as well. He was just eliminated earlier today, so in one of the later rounds of the lower bracket. So, teammates doing pretty well. Bunny Hopper did pretty well. We saw him on the stream yesterday. And, of course, Nixley and Diggin being the two players from the last season's championship to make it the furthest. But we are now in a situation where all of the previous players that have made it to the Winter Championship are out. So we're going to have 8 completely new participants for the Spring Championship than we had for Winter, which, is a little bit of a cool thing, just because, just the scope of players across Europe is pretty big, and now we're seeing some of these known players make it through. So it's been pretty cool to see the road from some of these players. Yeah,
and just to note as well, although the players are out that were in the last one, they actually, a lot of them got very far. Like we said, Nixley only just lost to Devou, in the previous round. So these players are still consistently performing, and I have no doubt we'll see them in the next season as well.
It's also worth noting that I mentioned this yesterday at the beginning of the broadcast. This is a whole different game now. Standard has cycled out a lot of the pre-existing cards, some of the pre-existing decks. Whispers of the Old Gods introduces new strategy. So it's really cool to see the players from the winter season get that far. But I'm also not surprised to see some people who've mastered this meta kind of get to this point. Like Thijs, we've had the chance to see him on stream. He's navigated his matches pretty flawlessly, so no surprise to see him this far. 1 win away from the Europe Spring Championship.
Yeah, he's definitely one of those opponents where if you could Thijs your deck lists, he's one of the opponents that you would really rather not, and it just be a secret. Because we saw yesterday, I was casting one of the games where he played it flawlessly because he knew exactly what was left in his opponent's deck and knew, actually, I don't have to do anything, I just have to armor up, and I know what you've got left will not be enough to kill me through fatigue. So, really impressive play.
He's such a genuine guy, too. He's a hard worker, and I always appreciate the hard workers, because those are the ones that, at the end of it all, will usually come out on top with consistency. Thijs is a player that hasn't taken outside before the European Championship last year in 2015. He hadn't taken like that sort of those big wins, but now he's going to move into this match. This is a decider match, but I'm going to step out and let you two gents, cast this one. So good luck, have fun.
All right, thank you, TJ. Devou is going to open up on his Control Warrior. Thijs, of course, bringing that Tempo Warrior that has been so popular. Raven, walk us through a little bit of what Tempo Warrior has in it.
Yeah, so Tempo Warrior, basically, obviously the loss of Despite is kind of rough. It's very much reminiscent of Patron Warrior without the patrons. A lot of the cards like utilizing Battle Rage and a lot of Whirlwind effects from, as we can see, the Ravaging Ghoul in Thijs' hand at the moment. And what it really excels at is just consistently putting threat after threat after threat on the board. And then it even pushes to late game with cards like Malkorok, Ragnaros, Varian. Most commonly, I believe Thijs is playing the Varian version, to then just refill the board late game as well, so you have consistent card draw and consistent threats to keep on top of your opponent, as well as some of the most powerful removal in the game in the form of Execute.
Right, does have that powerful removal, is however missing cards like Brawl, which Control Warrior obviously does bring with it, and forces Tempo Warrior into the situation that it doesn't find itself in all that often as a deck, which is, how far do I extend, how far can I extend before I see a complete board clear, and there are points where actually Tempo Warrior can just run out of gas if it plays the Varian, the board gets just removed via Brawl, so interesting matchup for Thijs. I'm of the opinion that Control Warrior is slightly favored in this, but we'll have to see, obviously, how this shakes out.
Yeah, I think what Thijs will need to do is, and it's looking okay for now with that Frothing Berserker and Bloodhoof Brave in his hand, but he needs to put threats so fast that the Control Warrior is actually using things like, say, Shield Slams on like Shield Slamming a Frothing Berserker, then you're good, because then like Ragnaros becomes safer, Varian becomes safer, so on. So it's just forced that removal out on mainly, probably not the highest priority removal targets for the Control Warrior. See, both players there just gentleman's agreement. Let's start the game with a War Axe each, and then go from there.
Right, a War Axe a day keeps the minions with 3 health away, generally speaking. Although there aren't too many of those, with the exception of maybe Acolyte of Pain and Ravaging Ghouls. Now, we see at least Starseeker and in Devou's opening hand, and that's going to be kind of the difference maker if this game goes late. Obviously, you get to Golden Monkey, you get to those legendaries, and that's where Tempo Warrior can just lose once they're kind of out of gas. And Tempo Warrior is constructed similarly to Patron in that a lot of it is kind of based on the draw engine.
Yep.
So while there are a lot of really hardy threats, Bloodhoof Brave is a recent addition, there aren't an endless amount of threats, which is what at least Starseeker kind of gives you.
Yeah, exactly. And we saw some matches yesterday against Tempo Warrior where actually players just chose to just let them burn out of cards. Like, I think it was actually Loyan, I believe, played against Tempo Warrior and just said, well, I'm just going to let you just deal with every single minion you play, but then not do anything else and let you just run out of cards and not really be able to cycle that Battle Rage very well.
Right, we see the Doomsayer come out now. What you're looking to block here from Thijs as this Tempo Warrior is something like Acolyte of Pain, something like Frothing Berserker, which we do see in Thijs' hand, so has to decide basically if he wants to waste an Execute to get rid of it, as he does have the Slam and the War Axe, but he would need 2 more points of damage. At this point, I'm inclined to believe it's not necessarily the best investment of his resources, but there is a consideration, as you said, that he has to go kind of fast here.
Yeah, it's really tough. Obviously, the Acolyte wasn't dropped down from Devou there because the War Axe just instantly deals with it in just one swing. I like this from Thijs. I think if there's ever a turn you can afford to not deal with a Doomsayer, it's this one. He only had Frothing Berserker. He still has the coin, so he can really power forward later and maybe catch up on the delay that he got from that Doomsayer. So I think this is really nice. Holds on to the Execute because the Control Warrior does still play taunts, right? Probably got some Bloodhoof Braves in there potentially, and also just big scary creatures you actually just want to execute.
Right, so Devou does have the initiative, and he's going to go ahead and just play down Elise. And, Elise not necessarily super powerful in what she brings. The 3-5 stat line is nice, kind of helps patrol the board a little bit. But more importantly, he's the one with the minion on the board now. And this is probably a state that he's not going to be in too much for most of the early to mid game.
Yeah, and I was going to say, this is actually forced out this play. So what this does is, there's Elise plus the War Axe. So Bloodhoof Brave is suddenly just dead, which is, something very frustrating. You want the Bloodhoof Brave to be on the board and be a consistent threat. It's like, do I damage it, but then it hits for 5? Is it going to just taunt and let the Frothing Berserker sit behind it? But instead, this has forced Thijs to actually play the Frothing and utilize that coin again. So keeping the coin and not doing anything too crazy with the Doomsayer sort of paid off to a certain extent because it allowed him to then sort of just catch up again. And, having the Frothing as a 4-4 on the board isn't too bad either when there's not a direct removal. It would require 1 more point of damage.
No, Devou has to deal with that pretty quickly here, otherwise it can get rapidly out of hand. Love watching Thijs play. He's a very emotive player. He's one of those players who's constantly talking to himself, doing the math, considering alternate lines of play. And, if you played Hearthstone before, I assume most have, it's one of those things where, yeah, you have 75 seconds to make that turn, but when the stakes are this high and when you're, 1 win away from going to the Europe Spring Championship, which could eventually lead back to BlizzCon for Thijs, obviously, he finished top 4 last year. This is one of those things where you're considering every single play you make, even when it's not your turn. You're just thinking,
I mean, you can see him there. He's there, counting. He's not just a lot of people will probably just sit and be like, so what's my opponent going to do?
Checking their phones.
Yeah, just browsing other websites most of the time. That's my issue. But yeah, Thijs is consistently using all of the time he's got to just calculate what's going to happen, probably 2 to 3 turns ahead, and just getting his game plan out, because this is what you have to do in this matchup, because if you allow Control Warrior to just sort of sit back and just relax a little bit, it's going to build up either so much armor or so much removal in hand that you're never going to be fast enough. So he does get the Bloodhoof Brave down and clears up that ghoul. So this is one of the situations now where it's like, it's an awkward moment for Devou because Bloodhoof Brave is so weird to deal with on 6 health. Like, it's so much health for a 4-drop that if he attacks it and leaves it this turn, then it's going to hit him for 5, not 2. But then if he just leaves it on the board and can't deal with it, then, well, it's still a minion with Taunt that you can hide other things behind, like this Kor'kron Elite that's in hand for Thijs.
Right, the Bloodhoof Brave stat line and the ability to enrage for +3 is really what's made it stand out, because we see other minions with similar stat lines, maybe even something like Fen Creeper. Obviously 5, it's 3/6 with taunt, but it's the utility and the different ways you can use Bloodhoof Brave to, you know, scare your enemy into dealing with it maybe less efficiently than I'd want to. And for Control Warrior, efficiency is the name of the game.
Yeah.
You have to use those cards correctly. You don't necessarily have as much draw because of the lack of battle rages as the Tempo Warrior. So interesting to see how he chooses to deal with this. Could go something like Slam Execute. Looks like he's going to play down the Acolyte Revenge and then maybe followed up with the Execute.
Yeah, and this is what I was talking about earlier. There's potentially an Execute coming down on the Bloodhoof Brave. Like, Tempo Warrior's pretty happy with this. Like, I'm like, yeah, okay, there's one gone, because he's already got Varian in hand, and it just makes all of his bigger minions, Ken, most likely, I think Thijs is playing the Ken one, and, you know, Malkarok, Ragnaros. There's so many, like, big minions you're okay with, so there's one gone, but that's probably feeling pretty okay. He can now actually play this Arathi Weaponsmith if he wants to and just clear off the rest of the Acolytes to stop the potential 2-card draw that's left in that minion.
Yeah, we saw Devou kind of agonizing over whether or not to use that Execute, exactly to the point you were speaking of, which is there's so many better threats that you want to save that Execute for. We see, you know, Ragnaros is often in this list, Varian Rin, Karen Bloodhoof, the front half of that. There are just so many other things you'd like to use it on, but that stat line on Bloodhoof Brave just commands attention.
Yeah.
You have to deal with it. I do want to point out the Gamers League jacket on Devou. We saw that at the Europe Winter Championship on Diggin', and it was kind of jokingly the Han Solo jacket. I'm a big fan of it there.
Yeah, it's not a bad style. I'm a fan as well. And yeah, I like the way Diggin actually just took on that approach as well with the Han Solo thing. That was pretty cool.
Never tell him the odds. And then he started just basically tweeting Han Solo quotes. But yeah, the Arathi Weaponsmith is going to come out, use that axe to efficiently deal with the Acolyte of Pain. Gets 2 draws off of it, so it's not a bad thing for Devou, but that's one of those cards where you can't always stop the warrior from getting, you know, upwards of 3 draws on that.
Yeah.
If it gets 2, you probably just consider that a win.
Yeah, 3 becomes like insane value for the card.
Right.
2 is like super average, right? You expect 2 a lot of the time. But we're seeing in like Devou's hand now where like we can see that Gedun or Grom, whichever comes first, is probably going to be dealt with by Thijs, but he's just going to have to slam his own Acolyte. This is the second time we saw this play today, where you slam the Acolyte for double card draw, but oh, shield. But I was just going to say, he has the shield slams, but he's only regenerating 2 armor at a time. He's not been given the time to just sit in armor up, and, you know, Justicar's not been drawn yet. So this is a good position for Thijs to be in because he's just pressuring him enough to keep his health relatively low. Or low for a Control Warrior, I'll say.
Right, I was going to say, I think anything below 60 is low for a Control Warrior.
You're happy at that.
Right, Blood to Ichor comes into the hands of Tyson. Blood to Ichor is another card that's kind of a staple of this particular deck type, and it's one of those cards that's really made a big impression since coming out of Whispers of the Old Gods. I mentioned it yesterday. I wasn't super high on it when we were, you know, first showing it off, but it's one that's grown on me. And Psychotron in the hands of Devou, and that is an interesting card. It's not one we've seen too much. Players were evaluating it as a possible replacement for Sludge Belcher when it was being shown off. You like Psychotron in this kind of deck?
If I'm honest, I've been playing every style of warrior except Control lately. I'm currently playing Pirates quite a lot, but Psychotron, it seems like the most straight-up Belcher replacement. 5-drop, taunt, and kind of has a double damage required effect to clear it off, similar-ish to the Death Rattle of the Sludge Belcher. I don't know if its impact is enough. I think we've just seen a lot of players accept that there's no like really great 5-drop taunt minion, you know, and just try and build decks around it. But it could definitely do a lot of work in this. But Thijs has a pretty good answer to the Divine Shield in the form of that Blood to Ichor, and it's just how flexible that card is that you talked about earlier. There's so many different things you can do with it, especially when you're looking to either enrage your own minions, you know, proc them for battle rages as well, and you still get that 2/2, which is used for a lot of aggro matchups.
Right, you brought it up. Hard to replace Sludge Belcher, and I was making a lot of basketball references, and I had some European viewers tweet at me saying they actually didn't really know much about basketball. So I'm going to try a football reference here. Sludge Belcher's like Lionel Messi. There's just no replacing him, right, Lionel Messi? That's okay.
Yep, you got it. Nice one.
Thank you. So
we're converting you slowly but surely.
Man, I tell you, that and Doctor Who is just getting me. But we do see the Psychotron come down, and as you said, it is going to require 2 different sources of damage to deal with. And right now, Thijs could very easily pop the Divine Shield using that Acolyte of Pain. He draws the card, kind of settles for 2 draws. Isn't the end of the world for him because he has Battle Rages in his deck, but he doesn't have a really clear way, aside from Now he couldn't even use the execute, it looks like, so no clear way to get through that Psychotron right now.
Yeah, so he could have actually Bloodtaker on the Divine Shield and then use the Acolyte to do the 1 damage, but then the Acolyte would only draw 1 card, and as we said earlier, like card draw is just hyper important in both of these decks. As you do want to cycle through very quickly, as there's still a lot of threats that Thijs has left in the deck. There's Malkarot, there's Ragnaros that really starts to make dints in the his Control Warrior opponent's armor, so to speak. But there, speaking of armor, is just the card True Heart. So this might actually be one of the safest turns to get this card down, because I think that's the key with Justicar. Getting it down on a turn, you can just get away with playing a 6-3, and just hoping it's enough, because it can be dealt with so easily with the low health.
Right, we saw Justicar Trueheart was actually a big deal at DreamHack Austin, and the meta read on it was kind of that the meta has slowed down enough outside of dealing with maybe Aggro Shaman and Zoo to where you can play Justicar Trueheart. And in these matches that are more mid-range or control-oriented, Justicar Trueheart delivers so much value over the course of the game that I completely agree. I think this is a great turn to get Justicar Trueheart down, and he's actually going to go with Baron Geddon here, so that's going to at least get rid of the leftover slime there and put some damage on Karen Bloodhoof, and doesn't kill his Psychotron, so...
Yeah, exactly. So he could have actually gone into Bloodhoof there to kill the first part off, but there's no point because it just comes back as a 4-5. I think what Devou's trying to do is to just sort of halfway house between putting threats of his own on the board, because this is still, Geddon, although the effect is 2 damage to all of the characters, Geddon still is 7-5, so
yeah.
and we can see Thijs is sitting on 19 health, so he does have to answer it, as well as doing a job of making the Bloodhoof not trade very well into the Psychotron.
Right, and you can kind of see, Thijs looking at his hand. Thijs is actually not in any real danger. The question becomes how he chooses to deal with this. What is the sequence of actions? And goes ahead and drops down the Armor Smith before using the Ravaging Ghoul, wants to take advantage of that extra armor, get some value. He's going to get a really nice Battle Rage here, and he can just execute, has 2 in hand if he wants to on that Baron Geddon.
Yep, and this is interesting now, actually. So this is one of the other ways, like, he can it can normally feel like, oh, well, I want the 2-2, so I never want to Bloodtaker on a target it's going to kill. But in this case, it keeps his Cairn, like, before the Death Rattle alive, so you definitely want to do that. And again, it just shows how flexible that card is.
Yeah, that's what really makes it, is the ability to do all these things. And I was talking to Frodan about it, actually, because I was like, yeah, Blood to Ichor, the flexibility's there, but I didn't expect to see it run so much. And, he was saying it was like the Taskmaster, in a lot of respects.
It's very similar to, you could compare it to a 1-mana Taskmaster, right?
Right, obviously doesn't add additional damage, which sometimes you don't want, so...
yeah, I think a lot of the time you actually just want damage that it actually creates by, like, pinging something,
right,
as opposed to giving anything an enraged effect.
But Thijs has retaken the board now, and Devou forced to kind of look at what he wants to do, and I don't really think there's any super sexy options that immediately jump out. Might just want to draw that card first off of Shield Block. Could play down Justicar Trueheart, and looks like now's the turn. So, we mentioned Elise Starseeker being one of the ways you can kind of run away with this match as the Control Warrior player, but that's another way right there, is just keep armoring up, keep getting out of range, clearing threats.
Yeah, I think this is potentially a worse turn to play in than the previous turn, because he's literally... There's a ghoul on the board that instantly kills it. It's going to be gone to a 3-3, and there goes Varian, and what are we going to get? So there's still a lot of big drops in Thijs' deck. Frothing Berserker behind the taunt's incredible, and Malkarok, wow. Thijs shaking his head. He probably wanted the weapon from the Malkarok more than anything, but because if a Brawl lands now, he's in trouble. But if he got to play Malkarok instead, and maybe Malkarok was a Ragnaros, he'd be a bit more happy, because that weapon can sometimes, Rob, be a Doomhammer, which is pretty good in this matchup.
It's never a Doomhammer, it's always Lights Justice. I was going to say that, actually. It kind of felt like a little bit, Devou might have been telegraphing that he was okay to just play down the Justicar because he had a Brawl or something, but Thijs is going to just check him. He's like, okay, have the Brawl, because once Varian comes down, look at this board. You have the Frothing Berserker, you have a ton of damage.
A valid point as well is Varian doesn't super often drop 3 minions. Like, Varian is actually card drawer as well. If they're spells, they just go into your hand. So it's completely valid that Thijs probably expected 1 to 2 minions and then just a card draw of a spell as well, just to cycle through. But he ended up getting all 3, and again, this is very, very difficult for Devou to deal with, because there's too many threats. There's a 7-7, a 6-5, a Frothing Berserker that has to die, because with this many minions on the board, suddenly 1 Whirlwind spells for a very bleak outcome for Devou.
Yeah, very bleak indeed. Devou does have those 2 shield slams, and he has 10 armor, so you're thinking, okay, this is probably an okay spot. But look at the threats on the board. You probably have to get rid of Varian, and you're also thinking that maybe that Frothing, right? Just get it off the board. You don't want it getting super big, because you're going into a turn where it can attack, and your opponent has 5 cards in hand.
Yeah, and look at that. It's, out of all those targets, Frothing is the one that demands a 10 armor shield slam when there's a 7-7 and 6-5 on the board. Varian does take one as well, but there's still that would have been
Right.
grim.
And that's exactly why you get rid of the Frothing Berserker over the Malkarok, just right there. Yeah, you have no minions on board, so, what kind of bad stuff can happen, and there's the answer. Ravaging Ghoul, Whirlwinds can come out, but Thijs is very firmly in the driver's seat and did not see the Brawl, and that's the turn to Brawl. If you have Brawl, that's when you're doing it.
There was no world in which Brawl wasn't going to be played there if his opponent had it. That's why Thijs is okay to just say, yep, I wouldn't be surprised at the Bloodhoof Brave here either.
Yeah, no reason to play it quiet at this point. I think you just come out guns blazing.
I think a lot of the time, if your opponent blatantly tells you they don't have a card, you don't play as if they've just drawn it off the top the next turn, because the odds just simply aren't there, unless it's the last card in the deck, of course. But, in this case, there's plenty of cards left for Devou.
I mean, you also have the Cairn down, so even if the Brawl were to come out, you are more likely going to end up with a Bane and one other minion. So you've seen both shield slams.
Or he just trolls you and he lives, and you're like, oh, come on. I kind of wanted that death rattle.
Come on, old man, come on. And 2 health left. We're looking so good. But we see the Bloodhoof Brave come out, and again, fully loaded board. Has to be Brawl, and that is not a Brawl at all.
Yeah. And there's also, although Thijs can't enrage his own Grom here, or at least until maybe he might draw something next turn, still that's 4 damage from hand, an additional 4 from just the Grom for Thijs. So there's so much damage here, I don't really know if there's enough Devou can do. He does have Bloodhoof Brave though, that again we've mentioned, it's kind of awkward to deal with, but there's an Armor Smith on board and an Execute, so there's a very easy removal as well.
See the slam come out, draws Bloodhoof Brave, and Thijs just kind of sitting there like, what do you got? What's going to save you?
Yeah, I think he's just expecting like a Brawl, just straight off the top. He's just like, well, it's going to happen because the game's gone on for a little bit. They're quite deep into their decks now. It's going to be a Ghoul, and this is the problem. What this does is it removes the Kor'kron, makes a couple of things a little bit easier to kill. He can clear off the monkey, gain a bit of armor, but also it's just giving his opponent a load of armor as well. So the game's not going to end the other way either.
No, and we do see, he armors up, he clears off some of the threats, has Grom in hand and an activator now, so it's going to be game.
Yep, that slam off the top was pretty much decided there. An extra 10 damage from hand always is nice. And this game it was always going to go one of 2 ways here, where Devou, if he'd had that Brawl, the game could have looked very different because he'd already played True Heart, so he had the armor. He could armor up over time and carry on from there and just really stall out the game, but Thijs just didn't give him a single minute to catch up there.
Yeah, once he played down that Varian Rin, identified that there was no Brawl, okay, well, you don't have it, I'm just going to kill you. And I just said that's how that matchup kind of goes. It's reminiscent very much of Patron versus Control Warrior, which is you make the Patrons, they don't have the Brawl, you just run them over, and if they have the Equalizer, then things can kind of go down from there. But yeah, we do see Thijs get that win on his Tempo Warrior, so that is now finished for him. And for Devou, kind of unfortunate because I think that is a matchup you'd want to get the win on.
Yeah, it's one of those tough ones. Like the reason Tempo Warrior is so powerful at the moment is it doesn't really have any bad matchups. I don't believe. I think they're always just at least okay. They're always just decent, maybe slightly unfavored. So it can really take a win out of nowhere, and that's why we're seeing a lot of people bring it to this tournament.
Yeah, no, it's been very popular ever since really DreamHack Austin. We've talked about it kind of all day. That Patron Warrior's just been phased out of the lineups. Crane, even a very fabled Patron Warrior player, just said nope, it's not good enough to bring anymore.
When Crane says no, you know there's something wrong.
Right. So for Thijs, he is now looking at a Rogue and a Warlock deck, and we're gonna go ahead and see the Rogue come out. This is that Miracle Rogue of note. He is running the Leroy version. So
yeah, and they're both running Leroy, as this is going to be the Rogue Mirror. So this is a matchup we actually discussed before this.
Right.
We're like, both players are playing Rogue. Judging by the lineups, they probably won't ban each other's Rogue, so hopefully we get that Rogue on Rogue action.
Yeah, both players decided the Shamans were not things they necessarily wanted to deal with, but if you've
like
never seen... Right? Yeah, right, where's that option most of the time? Like, I don't feel like dealing with anything that is Doomhammer in it. But if you haven't seen this matchup, this is something that was fairly common back in the Curse of Nax Ramus days, which was this Miracle Rogue lineup. Actually, going back in, I believe, even to Classic was when we saw this lineup. But you're going to see both players kind of exchange chip damage with the daggers, and then once the Gadget Zands come out, it's pretty much off to the races.
Yeah, I think as well, like, although it's not always the first person who plays Gadget Zan takes the win purely through card draw, but a lot of the time it's actually if you can Gadget Zan conceal. Because Rogue pretty much has, because they're not really playing Blade Flurry anymore, has no real way to deal with a concealed Gadget Zan.
Right, and Tice goes ahead and keeps the Gadgetzan Auctioneer off the mulligan. He draws a second, but he does manage to have the conceal, and I love keeping Gadgetzan because, realistically, you're not going to be facing early pressure. You might see a tempoed out SI7 agent, but that's kind of as bad as it's going to get for you, and having that Gadgetzan, as you said, and being able to conceal it, super important to winning this matchup.
Yeah, I mean, it's just Ty's just completely identifying how he wins this game straight away, and he's like, oh, Gadgetzan conceal, yep, that'll do, because I've not seen many rogue, like, Miracle Mirrors not get to turn 6, right, or turn 7. Like, it's pretty straightforward, and the odds on him drawing the removal to deal with any aggressive openings are pretty high for the rogue deck as well.
Yeah, there's a lack of Wolf Riders and Leper Gnomes in this matchup. It's all about that card draw. We've seen some pretty awkward hands come out of this, actually, because there's so many spells. Actually, my second favorite British Hearthstone caster has actually been on record as saying that's the price of admission when you play decks like these. It's sometimes awkward hands just full of spells, but both players actually have some reasonable early game stuff going.
Yeah, sorry, I was just wondering where you were going with that second favorite UK caster there.
Can you guess who's my first favorite Raven?
Probably me, because I'm stood next to you.
Exactly,
Yeah,
and you identified it.
Yeah, and I got the reason correct as well. Because as you said the quote, I was like, I don't recall saying those words, so it must be subtle.
It must be subtle. But as we kind of mentioned earlier, this is a very slow matchup in the early going. Wouldn't be surprised to see either Shiv come out or Shiv dagger to the face.
Yeah, because I think something to note as well, although you want Gadgetzan and then spells, cheap spells specifically, because Shiv with Gadgetzan draws 2 cards, which is always nice. You also, if you might have just a better play earlier, instead of just passing, redagger, pass, redagger, sometimes a Shiv is good to just cycle into, say, preps, which are actually worth more with a Gadgetzan.
I mean, look, sometimes you just got to get that damage in.
Yeah, sometimes you just want to hit for 1, draw a card.
Devou could be at 27 right now. Maybe it's just the aggro player in me that supports that, but as you said, Tice will be able to get 2 cards off the Shiv with Gadgetzan out, and goes in and just redaggers. Could threaten, or maybe threaten the fact that he has like a deadly poison in hand in case of something like a tempo SI7 agent. So not a bad play at all.
Yeah, and this is looking really, like we can see Tice has a very, very clear plan here on how he wants to progress with this game and how he thinks he can win. Whereas Devou has like a collection of cards that are all very powerful, but don't really do much on their own, right? Again, you've just seen an SI7 agent played as a 3/3, as you said. There's obviously Cold Blood, there's Azure Drake, the Fan, all just like smaller pieces of the puzzle of just wanting to draw that Gadgetzan, because both these players run Leroy and Cold Blood, and that's what they want to work towards, just that big burst combo.
Right, the Earthen Ring comes out, tops him back off after he deals with the SI7 agent, and Frodan made an interesting observation when I was talking to him the other day, but some of these lists at the highest level have actually cut Earthen Ring Farseer, and the idea is that you ban out something like Aggro Shaman, you ban out something like Zoo that goes faster, and then you customize your deck to be a little bit better towards mid-range and control matchups. But we do see that Tice is running that Earthen Ring Farseer and does get the value off of it.
Yeah, I think completely right. So if you keep the Earthen Ring, it gives you a little bit more flexibility in your bans, especially in a tournament as broad as this with so many players in. Whereas if you are strictly planning for mid-range and control, normally 3 health doesn't make too much difference in those matchups, right? So you can afford to cut it, whereas, planning for something maybe with even like a Harrison, if you're expecting that kind of mess at the moment, with a lot of weapon classes might be worth more.
Right, goes ahead, uses that Shiv, sets up the Eviscerate to deal with the Drake, and he gets to keep his 3/3 on the board. And, 3 damage in this matchup is not at all small. The chip damage actually really can just make the difference.
Yeah, and also a pretty interesting point that we'll see next turn for Tice is he can actually afford to just play Gadgetzan and maybe backstab some, a minion if it's down, because he does have the second one ready to go with Conceal afterwards. So it'd be cool to see whether he actually just throws the first Gadgetzan, maybe lulls his opponent to a false sense of security if he just deals with it because he leaves it open.
Right, and that is something you can definitely do, especially as you pointed out, when you have the second Gadgetzan, you are aware that you're going to be able to conceal it. And obviously this deck wants to draw cards. That's what it does. Draws cards, has conceals, sets up Cold Bloods, Eviscerates to do a lot of damage. Has the Leroy as well, but there's a danger in overdrawing. So maybe putting out that Gadgetzan and just demanding answers and blocking their own possible Gadgetzan into something like a prep conceal is worth looking into.
Yeah. And we are going to see a Tomb Pillager draw off the top for Tice, so he does have options now and again. Suddenly, the Tomb Pillager coin you're almost expecting next turn is worth way more with the Gadgetzan and the Conceal, of course. So Tomb Pillager going down, and is a threat in itself at 5 attack. It almost has to be dealt with, or like you said, the chip damage from the Earthen Ring Farseer, plus now a Tomb Pillager will really start to add up quickly.
Well, we are going to see the conceal off the top, and then that Gadgetzan prep conceal means that Devou is going to be the first one off to the old Gadgetzan slot machine to see what he gets. Gets Zero Poison Mind, which will allow him to pick up a couple of extra poison spells there. But
yeah, this is really nice though as well, because he had both preps. He can prep sap the Tomb Pillager back, and suddenly what we thought was looking pretty good for Thijs, he's looking a little bit grim actually, as Devou just managed to get that conceal, and now all the other pieces he had earlier with the prep start to come into play. Now he's got the Gadgetzan on board.
Yeah, it's not what Thijs wants to see, but you know, does have his own basically to trade the Gadgetzan conceal. And no prep to follow up and no target to backstab unless he wants to backstab his own Gadgetzan. So
it's a play people have made in the past.
It is.
Sometimes you want that extra card, but now we're going to find out who has the best deals out of these two Gadgetzan. As Devou definitely has a lot more to play with, although he has already used 2 preps. So it means he is quite far ahead, but there's limited options he has this turn because he only has so much mana and nothing to reduce it by.
Right, and the spells he prepped were 1 and 2 mana respectively, so you're not even necessarily getting the big discounts on Fan of Knives, which is honestly, when you have that Gadgetzan down in a matchup like this, where you're not going to be using it to clear minions, that's great just to get the discount because it allows you to do more overall on your turn.
Yeah. You just gain more from the prep, like you said. It reduces more mana than just the one we saw last time. And here we go for the Cold Bloods. This happens very, very often where you don't really have like the Leroy burst planned, and you actually just go, well, Gadgetzan can attack this turn. I know, I'll do some more, and just spam Cold Bloods onto him to get those extra card draws for 1 mana.
Right, decides just to go ahead and play down the Edward Van Cleef at 6/6. Absolutely commands an answer. Thijs is staring down quite the imposing board. It only has 2 spells in hand, so this is suddenly a little bit more awkward, I would think, than he would like it to be. There's so many minions in hand.
Yeah, I mean, just drawing into... Maybe if you just draw into 1 more spell instead of the SI, it would have been a lot easier. But just having the 2, I mean, he's pretty much all in on these this backstab or Cold Blood, drawing something very important here. Thijs is probably really wanting a prep. Tomb Pillager is not that. So let's have a look what he draws for the second.
All right, Fan of Knives does get him 2 spells. Unfortunately, he can't prep that, so it is going to be basically another 3 points of his mana. He's only going to have 4 left after...
It's whether he wants to, actually. He might actually just try and go for SI onto the Gadgetzan and then play either Edwin or a Tomb Pillager and then trade his own Gadgetzan into 6/6 potentially. He does still have a second one. It's just, I think, if you leave these guys up, and if you chose to play just Fan of Knives, then your board is very weak. He is going to go for the 2 card draws, so he's just getting the value. Oh, okay. So if you're going to draw into a sap...
I mean, if you know you're going to draw the sap...
Yeah, I mean, Thijs is just a god, and it's like, so if I do this, it draws me 2 cards. The likelihood of these being spells...
Ooh, and a Conceal. That is a tasty draw right there. And look, you're the 2015 Europe champion. You went to BlizzCon, you finished top 4. Thijs knows what he's going to get off his draws. Like, why wouldn't you?
Who are we to argue? Who are we, indeed?
I do not believe, Raven, in my heart of hearts, that either of us is better than Thijs, so always defer
I would quite happily agree with you on that one.
Defer to his decision-making, but he's in a really good spot now. Well, actually, looking at the spells he has, he can't use either of them on the current board, although I would expect something to come down. You don't just play nothing if you're Devou here.
Yeah, he definitely needs to do something here, because also there's what... Thijs doesn't have Deadly Poison, right? So there's actually just 15 on ready in Thijs' hand now with the Leroy. So unless there's the Earthring Farseer comes down, he's in some big trouble. Yeah,
we even see the SI7 agent could be played as follow-up. So he's got 17
Oh, that's
damage.
true. Yeah, he's actually got the... Yeah, he can squeeze that in as well.
Now, if the Earthring Farseer does come down, we are looking at being 1 damage off for Thijs, but still in a really good spot here. And yeah, the Earthring Farseer probably has to come down, but you kind of feel like you're just stalling out at this point. Like, what are you really accomplishing with it?
Yeah, although, to be honest, it's called Miracle Rogue for a reason, and, you know, if you stall 1 more turn, that can often be the turn that you draw the cards that you need. It allows him to replay Van Cleef, which is a 6/6, which means there's lethal next turn for Devou. He's set that up as best he can.
That is a very important draw there. Preparation is going to allow him to dig through for that 1 more point of damage that he needs to find, and Fan of Knives off the top, that's 2 more spells he could potentially draw.
Thijs is good at this Gadgetzan thing.
You know, I don't have the skill for this. When I try to play it, my Fan of Knives does not give me what I need. And Cold Blood right there. And that is going to go ahead and ice the game for Thijs. Just, you know, getting the draws off what is honestly one of the chancier matchups I find. It's just...
Yeah, I mean, this matchup, as we can see, both players set up lethal like, either turn. So this matchup often is on a knife's edge when both players get Gadgetzan like in time and on curve.
Right.
And we could see that Ty's just about pipped it there with the God draws from GadgetZan. I mean, he knew what was going to happen. And to be honest, although I did just say God draws, when you draw that many cards, there's only so many cards in your deck, right?
I was going to say, when you only have 30 cards in your deck, at some point you're going to draw the majority of those 30 cards. And Tice is up 2-0, however, and again, just speaking of that matchup, it may seem like, Tice being up 2-0, like, oh, who's Devou? Does he necessarily deserve to be this far? But that matchup, it really is, to your point, is kind of on the knife's edge when both players get the GadgetZans down. And we saw, Devou got his down technically first, had the prep into the conceal, and then Tice got his own down. But it just kind of depends at that point. Getting the sap was so big for Tice. That being able to reset the Van Cleave was just such a huge factor, and that matchup could have gone either way, really.
Yeah, exactly. It just completely came down to how well the GadgetZans drew for them, and because both players played extremely well, and especially Devou just having not the best opening hand in the world compared to Tice, who pretty much had his win condition, or at least his game plan from the start. But it's just extremely close, and both players pretty much setting up lethally. It just came down to Tice just getting at the end there. But we got going on to the next match, and this is the deck I was quite excited about, and I hope we got to see. Is Devou playing effectively Beast Druid that has a sort of token sort of slant as well with Violet Teachers in as well?
Right, and Tice just needs one more win on this combo lock. This is a combo arena lock, and if he gets this, he is heading to the Europe Spring Championship after what was frankly a disappointing result for him last season in the winter season. He was not happy at all with it. So.
Yeah, let's be honest, a player of Tice's caliber, how can you ever be happy with not qualifying? He would pretty much just demand of himself that he should qualify for these tournaments and get, really far and make it to at least the top 8, because he's just of that caliber. He's won so many tournaments, played so well across a couple of years that, why not?
Yeah, speaking to that point, Tice is not from the culture of players, from the competitive culture who were invited to these invitationals, and that's how they got their big start. Tice was out there back in the day just battling, and that's how he's gotten to this point, and he's a player who looks at results and looks at, how well does he feel he played? And so for Tice to get to this point is very big for him. We'll have to get through Devou's last deck, and as you brought up, this is a very interesting one. We see double Raven Idol in the opening hand, but there's a lot of cards that are beast synergistic.
Yeah, maybe, again, Devou not having the best opening hand in the world. Living Roots on turn 1 never feels too bad. You just create the 2 tokens and start chipping away, potentially. But this deck does run things like Savage Combatant as well, which increases the hero power to +3 attack, which is always nice. And Mark of Yashaj, is that what it's called? Come on, Rob, I'm testing you. You should know this.
I want to... Real quick story time. I walked up to Ben Prode one day. I'm just like, how is this pronounced? And
okay, yeah, this is probably something we should discuss.
Right, kind of looked at me and he's like, it's Yasiraj. I'm like,
Yasiraj,
I don't feel like it's spelled like that, but we're going to go ahead and say Mark of Yasiraj. So I believe we can be quoted on that as being the proper pronunciation, but Living Roots is going to go ahead and spawn those adorable little treants, and does leave something on the board for Devou, and now it's just time to crack open those Raven Idols, and I assume at this point you're looking for minions.
Yeah, I mean, he has the Savage Roar as well, which is always going to be nice when, threatening a burst out of nowhere. But Swipe, again, good for clear. But against Reno, he just needs to put some pressure on. We see... Who's that guy on the left, Rob? I don't recognize him anymore.
I used to know that guy. We used to hang out all the time. I remember just silencing things, killing knife jugglers. We used to get together on the weekends.
And then he just dropped 2 health and he just wasn't good enough anymore.
It's like watching an athlete, who was really good 5 years ago, and then you're like, maybe you don't start him, but... he does end up taking Keeper of the Grove, so not a bad pickup when you understand that your opponent is running something like Twilight Drake, which traditionally gives Druid fits.
Yeah, exactly. There's no great way to deal with it. There used to be a good way, which was this card. And you know what? At this point, he doesn't have a crazy curve anyway. So also picking up this over Ancient of War. Ancient of War is going to come a long time down the road of this match. So he definitely wants to pick something early. And he did go for an Innovate as well. Right.
It's kind of fitting that Keeper of the Grove makes a cameo in one of the oldest matchups that players kind of remember, which is essentially Handlock versus mid-range Druid. Going to go ahead and tempo out the 2-3. I'm not going to give anything taunt, but this matchup isn't quite as bad as... In fact, it's really not anywhere near as bad as it used to be for the person playing the Handlock variant, because back in the day, you just knew that there was an inevitable amount of damage coming your way. But now that that combo's gone, you can fight the Druid a lot more honestly.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, and I really like this Savage Roar from Devou. Again, more probably happening before the expansion, but he just identified that he's going to get a lot of damage and value from this Savage Roar. He can kill the 2-3, which we probably only saw get dropped from Tice because he knows the deck list, right? If he thought this could be Cthulhu Druid or Ram Druid, he'd probably just drop a 2-3 Taunt Giver on an empty board.
No, the Cthulhu Hour comes with Aka Wonder, so we will get there, but yeah, this is definitely not that deck. Tice can just use Immortal Coil to very easily get rid of the Treant, but what also beats Treant's Giant Dragon.
Yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing Tice's face when this silence comes out. And
It
this,
is pretty perfect.
This living root just goes boop onto the Twilight Drake.
Here we go.
I must safeguard.
Hey, there we go.
Tice is like, of course, I played a Drake. Why wouldn't the Druid have the Keeper of the Grove? So
even now.
Silence. He could have even innervated out the hero power just for old time's sake. But the Treant is going to more than take care of it, and I guess we're looking at funnel cakes now.
Yeah, I think this is again, Devou's hand is just double swipe is very reactive a lot of the time. You can use it for burst to finish up the game. But he just got a little bit better with Fandral in hand, but he just really wanted those early minions and the buff cards to really just move forward with the game, whereas I feel like he's been a little bit slow, and whenever you slow down as the aggressor against the Reno lock, you're just giving them the initiative all the time.
Absolutely, and Fandral is a very interesting legendary as Whispers of the Old Gods legendaries go. Obviously, allows you to choose both effects from the Druid Choose Your Own Adventure cards. Doesn't have any in hand yet, but things like Wrath suddenly become amazing.
Yeah.
You know, 2 mana, 4 damage, draw a card. Nourish becomes really good depending on when you draw it. Yeah, that's a really good one, especially because, you know, if you have it on 4, you can do something like Innervate with Fandral and the Wrath, but we don't see anything just yet, so Devou's going to hope to get some of those cards, and we saw the hero power come out from Devou onto Funnel Cakes. Why would he do that?
So basically, he's just setting up because he has 2 swipes, right? So he's definitely going to want to use them and try and get some really high impact from them. But Tice is just going to say, okay, you clearly setting up for some kind of swipe here, putting me conveniently on 4 health when he's actually sat with 2 cards in his hand for a good portion of the match. And speaking of the Fandral and the Wrath combo, it is available. He can actually just clear this whole board if he really wants to with Fandral. He could Wrath and Innovate Hero Power, but this board again just gets cleaned up with swipe pretty easily.
Yeah, this is I feel like the second time Tice has forced Devou to have an answer, but this time Devou does. He wasn't bluffing. He does have 2 swipes in hand, now 1 after using it, and that Keeper of the Grove is going to continue to get in some chip damage.
Yeah, I mean, his health doesn't matter as long as he's alive, right? You know, he could have 4 health, he could have 2 health at the moment. He's still poking for 2, and he did his silence effect, so he's still getting some work done even now.
Right, so looking at how Devou's deck works, which is just to kind of abuse the beast synergies a little bit, get the big Fandral turns, how do you beat something like Reno Lock, which has the ability to heal so much? Any insight into that? Because I feel like looking at this, it feels like the combo Reno Lock should just have the edge.
Yeah, especially if it draws the AoEs, which we can see Hellfire is a big deal here. What you would normally want to do is build up the board with the smaller beasts and then just threaten Savage Draw all of the time, or even double Savage Draw potentially, to just get burst damage out of nowhere. It's a form of combo deck in itself and a way to deal with a lot of these classes that are just sitting on high health all the time and have big heals in the deck. The only thing here for Devou, it's not really panned out with starting with swipes too early and everything like that, but he does play Fandral, Wrath, and it looks like...
Well, now he's thinking about the double Wrath there, because I think he went to play the Innervate before he got the Wrath.
Yeah.
So he was just looking at using Hero Power and the Keeper of the Grove to get rid of that Doomsayer. But now, he has to make that decision, and the fact that he's pausing actually might inadvertently give Ty some information.
Yeah. Yeah. Giving him the odds that he had multiple ways to actually deal with that. He does go for the Wrath again, just the 4 damage in the card draw is huge. And there's Druid of the Saber, probably something he wanted a little bit earlier. Also benefits of Fandral, so it becomes
technically benefits. I want to say this is a lot of that.
Do you not say it's not a benefit?
It benefits. It's just, a lot of the other ones are a lot sexier, right? Like Druid of the Claw comes out 4/6 with taunt and charge. Wow, how cool is that? And then
Sexy is a word I didn't think I would describe a Druid of the Claw in its new form. But
I mean, you see the hair. It's well, great color. I mean, as someone without hair, I really value.
I was going to say, it's clearly a jealousy thing more than anything.
Right. Druid of the Saber, though, can come out, will be affected by Fandral. Becomes a 3/2 with charge and stealth. So, I mean, hey, it's a 3/2. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. +1/+1.
Charge or stealth, you got options.
Yeah, you don't have to attack, Rob. That's what Fandral does. It gives you all the options.
You don't have to attack, but you probably should. We do see that Devou can use Swipe and the Keeper of the Grove to get rid of the buffed up Bran. We'll just have the 2/2 Defender of Argus left over. And, has enough mana to play the Druid of the Saber and then just go ahead and Hero Power, but we'll see what he chooses to do with this turn.
Yeah, going to choose whether he keeps his stealth or whether he attacks. But yeah, what's really interesting now is, though, if Fandral goes into the 2/3, which we'll see, he's going to go with Swipe.
Well, he can't Swipe now.
Yeah.
Unless he miscounted mana.
Yeah, so he chose to do the Savage Roar instead. So this clears it up pretty easily. So this is what's interesting. Do you want to... Is he just going to go face? Oh, okay, good. If he traded the Fandral into Defender of Argus, then we can see, obviously, that Thijs has Hellfire, but it does open his whole board up to like an AoE clear, and getting Fandral off the board has got to be a priority for Thijs now, because it's starting to cause so many issues. The Wrath's getting the extra value, even these Beasts coming out, and you'll be able to charge as 3-2 is kind of nice as well.
Well, and here's the thing to consider. If he Hellfires to clear this board, which we're going to see the Shadow Bolt come out, he's at 4 health then, and the swipe is in the hand of Devou.
Yep.
So he's going to go ahead and Mortal Coil here and just trade this out the old-fashioned way. And now he will be looking at a turn 9 Jiraxxus if he wants it to heal back up. Has Siphon Soul as well. So what do we need to see
still
here?
Druid of the Claws.
Druid of the Claw is not there.
Drake.
We'll have a spell-boosted swipe, though. And an Innervate. Do you possibly just play down the second Drake?
Yeah, I think that's okay, because the odds on the Warlock healing and dealing with both minions with only a 3-3 on the board are pretty low. It's going to hold on to the Innervate, though, which is interesting because he's only going to draw one more card, right? So what is he really thinking he might need to innovate out? I'm pretty sure the curve of this deck maxes out at about 5 anyway.
Right, and Thijs now in a situation where he can just Siphon Soul the Drake. He will go back up to 9, and you know, again, this isn't like old Druid where if you're under 14, you're just dead. Like, every point of damage really matters for the Druid player, and if he does play Lord Jiraxxus here, he'll have to use 2 sources of damage to deal with the Drake, which he might be okay with.
Yeah, I mean, at least it creates an empty board and you can just plan around it much better. Like I said, Thijs hasn't seen the Druid of the Claws yet, which the main threat, probably, the main instant burst left in the deck. And it's going to be Druid of the Saber, which he can charge for 2 attack. And there's the Druid of the Claw.
So he is putting together a pretty good amount of damage here with these charge, and you can kind of see the deck's win condition kind of piecing together. You have these Savage Roars, you have the charge minions, and yeah, so he's going to actually put him in the same situation before, where if he Hellfires, and that's not going to clear the board, but if he Hellfires, he's going to be in a spot where Swipe can kill.
I didn't know whether he was actually going to use the Druid of the Saber actually in stealth and not play the Druid of the Claw, and then play Druid of the Claw Swipe next turn as sort of surprise burst, right? Because if you leave your opponent on a higher health, it might push them into a less defensive play. And instead, you then just burst out of nowhere, because again, he could easily play Druid of the Claw Swipe next turn, and he could have got Hero Power in this turn instead.
I mean, he definitely could, but looking at if Devou draws a second Druid of the Claw here, he'll have enough mana now to use Druid of the Claw and Swipe.
Yeah.
So he would have some extra damage.
Yeah,
but I agree. It definitely alters the play your opponent makes. And we are going to see the Infernal come down, and Swipe and Hero Power is going to go ahead and wrap up this game for Devou.
Yeah, this is what happens when you play Reno Lock and don't draw Reno. You can definitely just get pressured down, and like he said, that Hellfire, what we thought was going to be quite impactful in the matchup, was never quite enough because it just pushed Thijs too low in health.
Right, and the stat line on some of Devou's minions, the Azure Drake, the Druid of the Claw, made it to where Hellfire was kind of a non-factor.
Yeah. What's interesting as well is that Keep of the Grove actually made quite a big impact, because there's no other good way to deal with it for the Druid. That would have traded probably at least 2 for 1. The Twilight Drake otherwise. So that was a pretty cool pick there. We did see it make a bit of a cameo that no one thought would really see this weekend. Yeah,
it's kind of like watching, like an Avengers movie. Like, one of the lesser known heroes comes back, he's going to help you. Yeah, but he does get that win and stays alive, more importantly. Thijs, again, will have to close it out with the Reno combo lock to end this series. But good showing from Devou, and, that's a deck I haven't seen anywhere on ladder. I have seen some Fandral decks, but they're not necessarily using the beast synergies from what I've seen. So do you think that deck is good enough to take a stroll on ladder, or do you think it was maybe targeted towards something?
Yeah, it's a tough one as well, because it's not as if it was ever going to be a surprise pick, because every player knows their opponent's deck lists anyway.
Right.
I think Orange took a similar list to DreamHack. Austin, I believe. So he was very confident in the deck, though. He was talking to him beforehand. He was like, yeah, I've practiced this a lot. I think it's really good. I practiced it with friends and such. So I think the deck's has definitely got its niche, but personally, I'm not the biggest Druid player in the world either, so not something I would play too much.
Right, and Druid was the second least represented class in this tournament, just above Hunter, and I think it takes real courage as a player to look at a deck that isn't necessarily seen as being one of the high power decks and bring it to something as serious as the Europe Spring Preliminary, because again, this could be your ticket to BlizzCon later on this year in the Hearthstone World Championship. To be able to do that speaks volumes of Devou's courage.
Yeah, exactly. It just, you know what, I can't really argue with people who take a deck that they're comfortable with. They think it's good, and also if they're ever going to do something like that, it's now just after the new expansion's released, just after standards hit. And let's be honest, there's still a lot left to explore. It's not like all the deck lists are done and dusted. Everyone's already decided what's good and what's bad. I think there's a lot more to come yet. And, this Beast Druid, we might see more of in the future.
Right, and this is the upper bracket. This guy.
Yeah, it's not like this is his first match of the day, of the weekend. Sorry.
This is one match away from advancing. So, yeah, hats off to him, and hats off to Yogg Load Hunter guy, who is no longer in the tournament, but
he tried.
I was very fond of that guy. But we are going to see here the Miracle Rogue versus the Reno combo lock, and this is a matchup that can get really scary for the Reno combo lock if basically Devou opens up on 6 or 7 with the Gadget Zan and is able to just go from there and kind of kill him over 2 turns. And again, Thijs doesn't get that Reno.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is one of the matchups, again, with most burst matchups against a deck like Reno, where you always have to play a bit more defensive, even if you're around like 18 health or something, where normally you'd feel fairly safe. With these combinations of potentially stack up so much damage like the Leroy we see in Devou's hand, there's always a bit of a fear in there. But if Thijs has a Shadow Flame and a big enough minion for turn 6 or turn 7, depending on when the Gadget Zen could come out, it is probably the only way that can clear off the Gadget Zen quick enough to hopefully reduce down that crazy card draw.
Right, but if Thijs can manage to stabilize, can manage to deal with the Gadget Zan Auctioneer, obviously the deck has a lot of ability to heal. Even a late-game Gadget Zan Auctioneer coming out, Twisting Nether can deal with. So,
yep.
Very interested to see how this one pans out. It's not a matchup I have a ton of experience with, as I actually just don't really play much Reno Lock at all.
No, you're not a Reno Lock fan?
I'm a Warlock fan in general. Really? Yeah, they're the evil class.
Yeah, it's because you're too nice, isn't it, Rob?
Depends who you ask. Raven, to you, yes. The answer is yes. But Devou sitting on that Gadget Zan Auctioneer, he has the prep, so if he can find a conceal, he'll be in a really good spot going into turn 6.
Yeah, this is kind of funny though for Thijs. Like, it's looking like he's edging towards the old handlock turn of a potential turn 4 Mountain Giant, and then the old response from Rogue, which was Sap.
So I'll deal with
we
this
got
later.
a bit going to the past here and seeing what it used to be like in like the handlock versus Rogue matchup. You always played it, but you always knew they had Sap.
Yeah, and this is one of those things when you were watching like the big players of 2014 try to figure out how to get around Warlock. It was usually just Sap or something to where they put in like Assassin's Blade or just big weapons to deal giant blade flurries to even get around it. But Zeril, Poisoned Mind is going to come down, and we are going to see, I believe that's Fire Bloom Toxin in the hand of Devou.
Yep, that's deal 2 damage, right?
Yep.
I'm still learning all the toxins.
I think we're all right there with you.
Yeah.
It's red toxin. It's blue toxin.
It's that one. It's
like you just compare them to like colors of like popular like fruit-based drinks. It's like, yeah, that's the blueberry flavored one, right? No.
Sure.
Thanks. Thanks for sticking with me there, Raven.
No worries. After you've been so nice to me as well. But we did see the Mountain Giant come down, and yeah, that's over.
Yep.
And the Sap response from the Rogue, so not too much of a surprise that he did choose to use the Sap there. And Devou's actually putting together a collection of cards here where, his Gadget Zan turn is going to look quite good with the preparation. He does have some 1-mana spells, depending on whether he chooses to maybe delay Gadget Zan by 1 turn if he doesn't have the Conceal.
Right, and as you brought up, that Conceal, it's kind of something you have to wait for, right? Because the Handlock probably does have an answer by that point. Siphon Soul would do it. There are other ways of dealing with it. Although
Shadow Bolts as well.
I was going to say, not that conveniently. And again, because your opponent's running one-offs, it's one of those things where you might feel a little bit more comfortable, but it feels like a lot to chance.
Yeah, I think the issue with his hand is it's very good with Gadget Zan on turns. He can like chain spells. But he doesn't have the second Gadget Zan. Other than his Yordrake, he doesn't have any follow-up if his Gadget Zan is dealt with on a turn where he's just sort of played it, prepped once and hoped. So I think we might actually see a slightly delayed one. He does have that Zeril down though, so that's going to give him one more toxin that you'll have to tell me the name of the drink when it comes out.
I mean, no, you said we were done, so you don't get to know
anything. No! I'm sorry, I take it all back, Rob.
He will have the ability though to deal with this if he wants to. Could just prep out the Eviscerate and use his arrow, but chooses to pass on this, and the Mountain Giant is not sapped. He is in play. He is here to stay and can start dominating this board. Might just trade into the Drake. Hard to believe he just starts going phase.
Yeah, this is actually getting kind of awkward where Devou's managed to pressure Thijs. He is only on 18 now. Although the Mountain Giant's down, it is only 1 minion, and there's already 2 minions down the board, which you're going to stack up quite a lot of damage for Devou. So there's definitely a lot of pressure on Thijs to make probably a defensive play here, but he can't Senjin and Farseer. I'm wondering how relevant a potential Shadow Flame is, although you do want to save it for that Gadget Zan.
Yeah, it is one of those things where if you use it now, it's not something you feel particularly great about.
Yeah.
But your health being at 18 and 2 minions on the board, you might just feel it's a necessity.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for all Thijs knows, there's like double cold blood eviscerate in hand, and suddenly you are actually just dead.
When you're playing against Miracle Rogue because of all the damage they have, it's like one of those things where you just are constantly picturing worst case scenario. And double Mountain Giant, so this is now looking a lot more like a classic handlock because we see two Mountain Giants.
And the reason for this play is that the Faceless is normally used to combo with Leroy to do a big burst, right? But Thijs probably quickly identified that this is not the way this matchup is going to be won. He is not in control enough to be able to like wait for Leroy, wait for Emperor, wait for Power Overwhelming and kill him with that. So he's just going all in on having like 2 huge minions and then pressuring through there, because that is now 16 damage on the board represented on Thijs' side.
Right, and again, this is something that, you know, in this matchup back in the elder days of 2014, this is something you had to consider is, are you racing? And wow, we see...
Have we missed... Is this just lethal?
Is it?
So he has Deadly Poison for +2, and he can prep Fire Bloom. Oh, he has prep of it. Oh, he has the second prep for this, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
never mind.
I didn't see the second prep draw, so Devou is actually going to take this game, and wow, that escalated quickly.
Yeah, we're like, what's going to happen
Giants.
2 to 3 turns from now? But yeah, he spots the lethal, and wow, Devou ties up the series 2-2, and this has really quickly turned into a tie match now, and you see Thijs is not looking like he's feeling particularly good about the situation, and hard to blame him. This was really going in his favor, and now suddenly tie series.
Yeah, I mean, we could see even that game is one of the more frustrating ones you could play, because that was out of his control. There was very little he could do about that match. Devou just played very well, kept the pressure up, and Thijs just couldn't react fast enough. He did get the turn for Mountain Giant, but that sap straight away just, you know, ruined everything. If he could have attacked the following turn, he could maybe have gained control quicker, but he was slowed down just enough. And like we said, in and around 18 health, you can just get burst down out of nowhere.
Well, and you made the point that, you know, he could have possibly Shadow Flamed to just completely clear the board. And it's one of those things where Thijs had options, but he evaluates it. He thinks, all right, I'm at 18 health. I killed the Azure Drake. I'm probably okay.
Yeah, the odds on him, actually dying that turn were probably lower than the odds of him needing the Shadow Flame for like gadgets and later.
Right, it's all about making that read, especially when you're looking at a rogue hand that is full of so many cards, and just reading that, okay, I can just make a second Mountain Giant, I can just basically bully him off the board, and then from there I kind of win.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. I think once Thijs, if he stabilized just for one turn, he could actually just get on top. And again, like the second arena comes out, you reset yourself back up to full. You're very confident against the rogue then, because there's often not much they can do with that much pressure on the board in form of 2 Mountain Giants.
Well, we are going to see this decisive Game 5, and this is Combo Reno Lock versus Control Warrior, and this is a matchup that, you know, we've seen, I think, 2 or 3 times now over the course of this weekend, and it kind of harkens back to the fact that this is a matchup that has existed for a long time. Obviously, slight variations to it. The overwhelming theme here is Warlock draws cards. That's what it does. And in a slower matchup, if you give Warlock time, the card advantage becomes almost insurmountable at points, unless you're able to have these massive swing turns as a Control Warrior player, where you can either end it with Grom, or you're just brawling off so many things that you can actually just kind of regain some degree of advantage.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's going to be really important here to see how Devou handles the removal, because the way this matchup can go as well is if the Control Warrior can just keep up with the removal, keep the board empty, not be under much pressure, you could potentially see an early Draxus from the Warlock if they have Taunt Givers in hand, because then you start making 6/6s and taunting them up, because although you get the power of the weapon, the 6/6 every turn, you set yourself to 15, and the Grom Burst does a lot of that life pool, but if you have taunts up, you can just guarantee, right, I'm just not going to die this turn, I'm not going to die next turn, and then the 6/6s just begin to overwhelm the Warrior, and he just runs out of removal by that point.
And excellent analysis of this matchup. Stampeding Kodo comes into the hand of Thijs, and that could be really big against the Bloodhoof Brave. That's kind of the best case scenario in terms of what it can get rid of. But
even a Frothing Berserker as well that's just been put down.
Well,
it's Control Warrior though.
I was going to say,
I have too much mid-range on my mind, but Kodo is also good against Frothing Berserker.
Mid-range on my mind sounds like an album you might record, Raven. But this is a very slow matchup in the early going. Probably just going to see armor ups, axes equipped until we get to that Bloodhoof Brave turn, which will be followed up by the Kodo turn.
Yeah, and Thijs actually going for the turn 4 Mountain Giant, I guess. Anyway, so he's having that Mountain Giant in the opening hand is pretty big actually, because a lot of the time, if you have to expend resources and you draw it late, it ends up being a 6 or 7 mana sometimes, and that's okay. It's definitely not 4 mana.
Yeah, he does play down that Imp Gang Boss, though, just to go ahead and get something onto the board, get something out of the hand. And might be a little sooner than Devou wants to start fighting for the board. Wouldn't be surprised to see something like Doomsayer just come out right now. The odds of it being answered are not super great. It will require probably another combination of cards, though.
Yeah, I think if you the odds on it being answered late game are very very high actually from the Warlock. So I think this is nice because also Imp Gang Boss can be very awkward to deal with and just a pain, just summoning the 1/1s as it takes damage. Just a real frustrating minion there. So I think Doomsayer is fine here, and it actually almost certainly will just lock out this Mountain Giant play. So really big deal for Devou there.
It will also spare the Bloodhoof Brave the indignation of being killed by a Stampeding Kodo. So Bloodhoof Brave, we talked about what we were looking to see as Bloodhoof Brave into Stampeding Kodo, but the match or the moves these players have made have kind of changed up how that whole sequencing goes. So now Bloodhoof Brave is safe, but you just lost your Doomsayer to the Kodo.
Yeah, and that's really clean, and also just guarded the Imp Gang Boss, and there's a follow-up with the Mountain Giant next turn possibly. So this board is quite quickly just getting a little bit out of control for Devou here. And he doesn't really have that many good answers. He does have the Bloodhoof Brave in hand. He's just trying the Psychotron as well. But in terms of removal, he has pretty much just Slam Execute or Slam Bash for the Kodo potentially. But all that seems a bit too heavy at the moment because Control Warrior is all about just managing your resources.
Right, we actually saw Devou had the Brawl in the opening, chose to toss it back. Can't blame him for that. It's not really something you keep in your opening hand, but might be a situation soon where he needs to start looking at it. I mean, he didn't deal with either of the threats on the board. He just basically played down his own because the 2/4 stat line obviously means that you're not going to swing the axe into that. The 3/5 on Kodo would have required the slam as well, or the bash. So Thijs is in a very good spot. And oftentimes Reno Lock has the sort of combination of threats to where, who's coming down? You can actually start piecing together your own zoo-like board if you draw them kind of in the right order.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of the openings are often like, you can play, say, Dark Peddler into Imp Gang Boss, and suddenly like, is this guy still playing the same deck? It's going to get quite aggressive. And this is what he's doing now. He's just filling the board up. And also he's Thijs is almost saying, well, I got the heal from the Farseer. The Imp Gang Boss has done some work. The Kodo's definitely done some work. If you brawl this board, I'm actually pretty okay with it. Everything on there has already got value. And if the brawl comes down, it means the Mountain Giant's more open following on.
Yeah, that is a good point to make there. But Devou has to start figuring out kind of what he wants to do. Psychotron would put up a taunt on the board that would require multiple sources of damage, so maybe not so bad. We could even see something like a Bash or just the Bloodhoof Brave come down. But it looks like he's going to start off by slamming the Earthen Ring Farseer, drawing a card, and seeing what he gets. Acolyte of Pain, not very good here because, again, you have things that have 3 attacks, so the Bloodhoof Brave ultimately ends up being the answer.
Yeah, I think it just provides the, the most, as you said, takes multiple sources of damage to actually clear up there. Never too easy. It'll probably take the Swampoos and the 3/1 of the Farseer, but this time, Thijs actually has Reno, which is definitely nice. He's kind of suffered from not having it in the previous couple of games, which is rough, but it's going to be interesting whether he goes for the Mountain Giant or whether he just builds on this board with the Defender of Argus.
Yeah, I can deal with the Bloodhoof Brave, and then I kind of like the idea of just getting down to Defender of Argus and putting down the pressure. It hasn't seemed like your opponent has had too many good answers starting out, so keep up the pressure, see what happens. Start by putting the Kodo into the Bloodhoof Brave, although if he puts down the Defender of Argus, changes things up just a little bit.
Yep, this is nice because what this does is it allows him to live tap as well. And there's no need to play the Mountain Giant on a board like this. You're already putting enough pressure there. There's not even just a card True Heart bin down, so the Warriors only gain 2 armor a turn anyway off the hero power. And the Mountain Giant's always a good follow-up afterwards because you're still live tapping, so you still have a large hand to make it cheap enough to be worthwhile. Yeah,
just continue to gather those resources as Thijs, and just look to possibly close the game out. As you were saying with that Jiraxis later on, you have the Reno. I don't even know if you have to extend any more than you already have, right? Like, he did so because it gave him a really good trade onto that Bloodhoof Brave, but otherwise, you're doing a fair amount of damage, and to your point, Devou can only get basically 2 HP per turn off that hero power, and, he has other cards that give him more health, but just kind of stalling until he can get control of that board.
Yeah, and this is just Thijs really showing that he doesn't need to overcommit to this, as you said. Like, he is doing enough damage, and also, again, it's just yet another board where all of these minions have done enough work. If they get brawled, well, one's still going to survive, and brawl's gone. So there's one gone at least. So even late game, you can just start playing around that. But I think it's just important that Thijs keeps live tapping and keeps his options open.
Right, so Acolyte of Pain, Bash, and Execute looks to be the order of the day. That will soften up some of the stuff on the board, but see Devou shaking his head because again, that Ooze just easily deals with the Acolyte. It's going to deny him extra draws.
And then execute on a Kodo. Like,
Yeah.
fantastic. Good job. Like, the Kodo's done the work, and especially as he's just drawn into Rag, he has Mountain Giant straight after an execute's been played. Ty's going to be feeling pretty good about this. You just see a slight nod from Devou, like, yeah, Mountain Giant. This time I don't have a sap.
Yeah, and this is quite the intimidating board. And one of the things to remember when you're playing against combo Reno Lock as opposed to just the standard Reno Lock variant is, once you start getting to the turns where Tice has, upwards of 8 or 9 or even 10 mana, you might not necessarily get the full Reno combo, or the full Leroy Jackson combo. But look, that damage is there, and if you're pushing him down to, sub 15 already, suddenly becomes a big threat.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where if there's just a minion already on the board to push a little bit more, especially when that minion's a Mountain Giant. This is huge. The Mountain Giant couldn't be dealt with. He's cleared the board. Tice rubbing his hands as what sort of likes to call Angry Rag is definitely an option here for 16 damage this turn.
Yeah.
2 8/8s, well, an 8/7 and an AA on the board. This is looking very, very grim for Devou.
Yeah, you already tried facelessing the Mountain Giant once. That was not the play. Obviously, Rag is just straight up better. You have him down to 10 now, and
there's 2 shield blocks. If he rips 2 shield slams, he could be okay for now. He's going to go for the Psychotron, probably the safer play. Does he just faceless the Rag?
I think that's an okay play right here. In fact, not even okay. I think it's just a really solid one. And
I'm just working out if there's actually just lethal.
So you Demon Wrath, that's 3 mana. You put the Mountain Giant into the Psychotron.
Oh yeah, because it's only 15 health, yeah. And then you just face this Rag.
Yeah, hey.
2 angry Rags.
You know what, Raven? We might be the worst at finding lethal, but Tyze is the best in this series, and he is going to the Europe Spring Championship.
Yeah, I mean, probably really happy. You can see that on his face there as he's just... that was getting very, very scary for him. He was looking so good at the start, and Devou started just battling back in games that probably Tyce felt he just had no control of. There's not much he could do to really take those wins there, but he did end it and just take that spot in the top 8.
Yep.
I think this sort of solidifies Tyce's spot as one of the most consistent players in all of competitive Hearthstone. I mean, such an impressive feat. He was the European champion last year in 2015, and now making it to another championship for that region is a really big deal, and big props to him because definitely a deserved victory for this young man.
That got weird. But yeah, this young man went all the way through the upper bracket, so never tasted defeat. He just won all the way through, and hats off to him. He's a very hard worker. Someone was saying his training regimen is one of the most intense of any of the players in competitive Hearthstone right now. So, you put in the work, you're going to get those results. Good meta reads all over.
To be fair, I was going to say young Dutch boy, but young man sounded less weird in my head. You just got to
take the high road, TJ. Take the high road.
But Devou is in the lower bracket now, so he isn't actually knocked out of the tournament yet.
Yep.
He's still got his chance to fight and make it all the way through, so he's not out by any means, but just taking a hard knock there. But Tyce, definitely a tough opponent to beat.
And you know what? Taking on Tyce and going 2 and 3, that's still really impressive. As we've said, Tyce is incredibly skilled.
I thought for a moment there he was going to mount a comeback because Tyce looked overwhelmingly favorited going into that third game where he had a 2-0 lead with arguably one of Tyce's most comfortable decks in the Reno Lock. He's sort of been a player that's been on sort of the forefront of innovation with Reno decks in general since the standard format was sort of released. So I thought Tyce was going to take a quick 3-0, but Devou, he fought back. But, big congratulations to Tyce. That's a pretty stacked lineup that we have now. The 3 players that we have going to the Europe Spring Championship is now Crane, Loyan, and Tyce, which are all 3 very strong players in their own right. That's a pretty stacked lineup already.
Yeah, it's great to see kind of, we were discussing whether the narrative for this event would be upsets again, but really hasn't been. Like, obviously some players have been upset. It's a shame to not see RDU make it to this point.
Yeah.
Had to be one of the favorites going in, but, for the most part, Loyan, not any stranger to competitive level Hearthstone, and we still have one more upper bracket match left, so could see Aka Wonder, I believe it is, make it there as well.
Yeah, he'll be coming up in the next match, and I believe Devou goes down to face George C., I believe, who's waiting for him in the lower bracket. We'll see him compete later on, but we do have a winner interview ready, I believe, with Tyce. So we're going to throw it over to Dan for that interview and some updates.
We have our third finalist for the Spring Championship happening next month, and it's Thijs from the Netherlands. Thijs, I want to ask you how you're feeling, man. You look like you were stressed. You've been here so many times competing on big stages, but this one looked like it meant a lot to you.
Yeah, it's you just always want to perform, and you want to like show everybody that you are like that you're just one of the best players, and I think it's also just my personality. If I am like in the match, I'm totally in the match. I hear nothing besides me anymore, and I'm just getting excited a lot.
Absolutely. Can you walk us through the emotions of going through this 2-day qualifier? You know, what's it like being there in the Netherlands, competing? I mean, a lot of people actually are big fans of you, too, in the local scene, too. So just describe to me your entire journey to qualify for the Spring Championship next month.
Yeah, the tavern here in Utrecht is pretty awesome. The people that are organizing it, everything is like perfect for the place, and I have a lot of people here also cheering for me. That is extra motivating. Yesterday it was a long day, a really long day, exhausting day at the end, but I was really happy with my performance and also how I played off stream. I think all of my series were almost 1.5, 2 hours, so I was totally broken, had an okay sleep, and yeah, pep myself up for today.
How are you enjoying the tournament as a whole? I know a lot of people, they were talking about how they enjoy being able to play against so many players, but also like the deck list, the preparation. What was your favorite part of the tournament from preparing for the event all the way to playing for it?
I think that showing the deck list is really a good improvement. It really shows that, yeah, it's so important to know what your opponent is playing, and you can like have it in your mind. You can like make different decisions because of it, and I really like that part as a new inclusion. And yeah, it's just also really cool for everybody can like get here, and it's just really cool overall.
Thijs, you're the reigning European champion from last year.
Mhm.
This year, are you going to repeat that same thing, become once again a Europe champion for next month?
Of course.
There you go. I love that answer. Very short and sweet. Thijs, you want to give any final shout outs? I know you have a lot of people who help practice, a lot of people who help get you in the right mindset and set you up for success. The floor is yours, buddy.
Yeah, well, first I want to thank my team G2, of course. They are supporting me a lot on, like, they are taking a lot of take care of stuff that so I can like perfectly perform at all the events. Big shout out also to my teammate Radu that helped me prepare. Show, I really the warrior, the tempo warrior that I brought. I talked a lot with Show, and he helped me making my tech decisions for the deck for the matchups I wanted. I made the Reno lock together with Stan Sivka. We practiced 1 or 2 days for that. So I know both are also, I think, still like fighting. So I really hope they can do it too. And yeah, everybody, I asked a lot of people for some help, and everybody helps me a bit. And a lot of thanks to the community because they are, yeah, the whole Hearthstone scene is super awesome, and like they keep me motivating. And yeah, I love what I'm doing now. So
Oh, it's great to hear, man. Congratulations. I can't wait to see you next month for the Spring
yeah,
Championship.
same.
Oh, look at that. Well, Thijs does make it to the top 8, which means we have yet another person ready to check it off. Frank, you called it, man. And Thijs ends up getting his ticket to the Europe Spring Championship. I mean, there's something that goes a long way to say that, like, he's been so consistent for so long, which that's what people look for when attaching some of their names and some of their favorite faces.
Yeah, as excited as I am to be able to circle his name, I'm sure he's probably a little more excited to be locked up for the championship right now and back to back maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the whole point is that it's really difficult to try and find, you know, the group of 8 players based off only 14 selections. We had 150 plus players playing this, and these are the top players of their region. But, you know, and also while we have an opportunity, Frank, we have to cross out a name. We do have some updates from the lower bracket. So we have only 2 players remaining from R14, and we did have Stan Sivka, who was taken out by Casey. Now, Casey's a player that you guys might not know, but he's actually a practice partner of mine. I actually got an opportunity to play with him a lot, so I'm looking forward to his match. He's going to be playing WP up later. But coming up on stream, we also have AK Wonder versus Tony. This is the final match in the winner's bracket, followed by the 4 decider matches. Einer versus Cypher, Casey versus WP, George C versus Devou, the player we just watched, and then Oskaka versus the loser of this upcoming match. So 5 left. Do you think Oskaka can do it to just redeem us on the final picks from the casters, specifically me? I
I
still have my horses in the race.
I know you got your fingers crossed here. Maybe. That's all I got. That's all I got for you.
Maybe. Well, I mean, that's a very safe answer, Frank.
Yeah, it's hard to say right now because I mean, look at this. If you look at the board right now, like it's been up and down all day, all weekend. So, you know, I mean, I'm just comfortable with my pick, and I like the way that shook out. So
Sure. Well, at worst, me and you have definitely at least landed it. And hopefully your guys' prediction and your favorite horses are still in the race as well. Make sure to hashtag HCT and get it there on the social media. Tweet at us at PlayHearthstone and Facebook.com/Hearthstone. Thank you so much, everyone who's tuning in to watch. We're going to go straight into the fourth match of the day, a.k.a. Wonder versus Tona. So let's head over to the caster desk and see what's coming up.